Okay, welcome here at Bible Baptist Church in Lake Katrina, New York. Take your Bibles if you would. Find Matthew chapter 2 if you would. Book of Matthew, Gospel of Matthew. Chapter 2. We're going to look at 12 verses today. The account about the wise men, okay? You guys probably have had over the years those nativity scenes, okay? Maybe some of you have had the little fancy wood ones, or then again there's the cheaper plastic looking ones. If you got a plastic one, I'm not trying to denigrate your manger scene, but I'm just telling you what's out there, okay? And but you know, the typical manger scene, you know, those manger scenes you buy in the store, you got like the donkeys, you got like the sheep, and maybe some other different barnyard animals. Then you got Mary and Joseph in there, that scene looking over the baby Jesus in the manger. Maybe you got some shepherds in the background, they're leaning on their staff. Maybe on top of the little nativity scene there, you got maybe angels on the roof, and if they're not on the roof, maybe they're hanging down inside on strings, but you got angels there. And then of course you got the wise men. They're all dressed up in their fancy robes and wearing their crowns. And they're kneeling before the baby Jesus, offering him precious gifts. Well, we also know those wise men were three kings. They were three kings from the Orient, just like the song says. And of course, they rode three camels, and they did that by night, just like those greeting cards. Okay. And when they arrived at the well-constructed stable, okay, the wise men got a glimpse of the baby Jesus with his divine halo glorying around his head in the manger. I saw that on a painting, okay. Oh, and their names are Balthasar, Melchior, and Gaspar. And they're from Arabia and Persia and India. We get all that from church tradition, okay? You know what? When we read Matthew's inspired account today, the biblical account, we're going to realize that a lot of that stuff, it's not taught in the scriptures, okay? In fact, a lot of times those details are the kinds of details that distract us from the main point of the account of the Magi or the wise men who came from the East. The truth of the matter is far more relevant than the layers of legend around that whole manger scene. Okay, because that's been overdone. Look at the text with me. This is chapter 2. Let's look at 12 verses. I'll read it. Follow along with me in your translation. I know I'm reading from the NIV, and some of you have a New King James. Some of you got an NASB, but follow along. Chapter 2 of Matthew, 12 verses. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time his star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child and his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I'm just going to stop right there. Wow. If we stick to what the Bible says, we'll need to make some adjustments to our nativity sets at home. Okay? Got to make some adjustments. Okay? We don't have to change the location. Okay? Because the text here tells us that it was Bethlehem in Judea. Okay? We don't have to change the date because our text tells us it was during the time of King Herod. And he reigned from 37 BC to 4 BC. Which tells us that, as odd as it may sound, that Jesus was born several years before BC. And BC stands for before Christ. So if Herod reigned from 37 BC to 4 BC, and he was on the scene when the baby was born, okay, that tells us that it had to be before 4 BC. So the people estimate that it was probably around 6 BC. That Jesus was born. But that's where the familiar facts begin to give way to the legend we have today, okay, regarding the manger scene. Okay. You and I have been programmed to believe that 3 kings of the Orient, okay, came bearing 3 gifts. And the Bible doesn't tell us that. It doesn't tell us there were 3 kings from the Orient, okay? In fact, the Bible doesn't even tell us how many men came from the East. It doesn't tell us it was 3 guys. It refers to them as the Magi or the wise men, refers to them in the plural, but doesn't say there was 3 of them. Of course, we assume that because they brought gifts and it names 3 gifts. Okay, but since it's in the plural, it had to be at least 2 guys, but it could have been 3, could have been 4, could have been 5, could have been 6. Okay, could have been that many guys. Now, is that a detail? Is that a detail to lose sleep over? Nah. Okay, so what I'm really trying to tell you is that if at home one of your 3 wise men figurines drops and smashes on the floor, you don't have to run to the store and get that 3rd guy. Okay, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Okay, just relax. It's okay. More significant is the fact that Matthew identifies the visitors. Well, that Matthew doesn't identify the visitors from the East as kings. He doesn't say they're kings. Okay. That idea is speculation, and quite honestly, it doesn't stand up when you think historically and when you reason. It just doesn't stand up. I want you to think about this. What Eastern realms in the 1st century BC could do without their 3 monarchs, their 3 kings, for the extended journey that it would have taken to get to Jerusalem? That's a trip, folks. And they didn't have planes back in those days. So the three kings from 3 countries can jump on some camels or some donkeys and travel hundreds of miles to go find the baby Jesus and be out of their countries that long? So if these were actual kings from Armenia or Parthia or Arabia or Scythia or India, and they traveled to Jerusalem, okay, I mean, when you think about it, if these were really kings, they would have been accompanied by hordes of people. We're talking servants here. We're talking about other officials. We're talking about people to guard them. So we would have had 3 kings from 3 different countries, and there would have been an army coming with each king. That's what it would have looked like. And they would have been all heading to the promised land. And they would have told their people back home, we'll be back in however long it would have taken. It would have taken a long time. So the travelers from the east, they're not identified as kings. They're identified as magi or wise men. The NIV says magi. New King James says wise men. I don't know what the NASB says or the ESV says. It doesn't matter. I'm talking to their magi or wise men. The Greek word is magos. Now you're blessed and you can go home and know that it's magos. Okay? And that word means, in the Greek, wise men or priest. Okay? It identifies them as experts in astrology, interpretation of dreams, and various other occult arts. Okay. Now, I got that from one of those English Greek lexicons, okay? So if you want to see it later on, I'll be glad to show it to you, but that's kind of what the word means, okay? But so it would be wrong to identify these guys as some sort of magicians or sorcerers, okay? I mean, the word does imply astrology and interpretation of dreams, but these are not magicians, they're not sorcerers. We should probably think of them more as philosopher sages, okay? Or astrologers who engaged in the interpretation of dreams and looked up and sought the signs in the heavens. And they also practiced other forms of primitive science, and they kind of mixed it with the folklore of the day. And okay, but why did they go travel to find the baby? Okay, and they saw this star. It's possible, think about this, that they had become familiar with the Old Testament prophecies concerning the coming of the Messiah. That somehow they had been exposed to the Jewish scriptures. I'm talking about the book of Isaiah or the book of Daniel. And it's possible they were exposed because that would have been known amongst Jewish communities. You got to remember, don't forget, at one time or another, the Israelites were taken out of their land by the Assyrians. They were taken out of their land by the Babylonians. And I want to tell you this, they didn't all come back. Some of them stayed. Some of them settled. So there were Jewish communities out to the east, spread out through Arabia and Persia and Babylon. So when they appeared in Jerusalem in a text, and the Magi, they immediately, what do? They get down to business. Okay, they got to Jerusalem, and I think that they were expecting to find a young toddler recently added to the royal family. I mean, let's think about it. You got the Hebrew scriptures, and the Messiah is to come, and he's going to be this Messiah king, Messiah priest king. Okay, wouldn't you have expected him to be added to the royal family? That's why in verse 2, when they get there, they're asking people, where is the one who has been born king of the Jews? And then they explain, we saw his star when it rose, and we've come to worship him. That's what the wise men were putting out when they got there. They were eager to worship the young Messiah. And then, of course, in our text here, the word was getting out there, and verse 3 tells us that when Herod heard this, he heard they were inquiring, and what they were inquiring about. It says he was disturbed. Okay. Disturbed. Some of your translations say he was troubled when he heard this news. See, in the mind of King Herod, there was only one person who was king of the Jews and was worthy of worship. And you know who that one person was? He said, me! It was himself. Herod the Great. That's a title he had given himself, and he'd gotten the Romans to give him his position there, and he got them to approve that he would be called not just Herod the Great, he was king of the Jews. And as Matthew makes clear here, okay, when Herod wasn't happy, this is in verse 3, the second half of that, when Herod's not happy, guess what? Nobody's happy. Okay. He says he was disturbed in all of Jerusalem with him. Because he was not a nice guy. So Herod's reaction to the arrival of the Magi was like, basically he goes into damage control. You know, damage control is when something's wrong and you got to fix it. So immediately in verse 4 there, he calls together his cadre of chief priests and scribes, or teachers of the law. Scribes, teachers of the law, interchangeable, whatever title you want to use. So chief priests and the scribes, and he calls them in. He calls them in because he wants a crash course on messianic prophecy. He starts with the most basic question for them. Where is the Messiah, or where was the Messiah to be born? Now, you know, on the surface, okay, his actions could have been interpreted as sincere. Maybe he just really wanted to know where the baby Messiah was to be born. Maybe he was simply trying to find the answer to the magi or the wise men's question, to discover the truth of the matter. Nah, that's not what it was. Okay. In reality, he only wanted to preempt any potential threat to his own throne. And you're going to find out later in the text of Matthew, even if that meant killing a whole bunch of children to do it. One commentator said this about Herod. Said he was incredibly jealous. He was suspicious. He was afraid of his position and his power. Fearing any potential threat. In fact, fearing any potential threat, this commentator said that he had the high priest Aristobulus, who was his wife Miriam's, I can't say that name, his wife's brother drowned. And then he had his wife herself killed. And then he had her mother and 2 of his own sons killed. And then 5 days before his death, he had a 3rd son executed. That's 5 days before his death. Okay? This is the guy who really wanted to keep his throne. Okay, so when he asked that question about the where, okay, he really wasn't trying to locate the Messiah's birthplace so that he could go shower the baby king with gifts himself. No, this guy Herod, he wanted to know where because he's out for blood. He's out for blood. But the priest and the scribes, the teachers of the law, they obliged King Herod. And they pointed out in verse 6 the prophecy of Micah there, okay? And, a very clear prophecy that it would be in Bethlehem in the land of Judah. God said that for out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people. So basically the prophecy was that the Messiah would be born in this seemingly insignificant place, which by the way is 5 or 6 miles or so out of Jerusalem. Out of you, the prophecy said, will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Interestingly, in the text here, besides presenting King Herod with a somewhat loose paraphrase of the passage from Micah, that they simplified which they seem to simplify the wording for the king. They left off a very important line from the original text, the original Micah 5:2 prophecy. Okay, they left off the part where he would be the coming Messiah, and he would be exalted to this position of deity, because that Micah 5:2 prophecy ends at the end, whose origins are from old. From ancient times, whose origins are from old, from ancient times, or from some translations, from everlasting. Okay, whose origins are from old, from ancient times, meaning he's always been. He's always been. Which would imply deity. So, having learned of the Messiah's place of birth, verse 7 here, Herod wants to know the time. Okay, he wants to know the time. Then Herod called the Magi. Now, this is not the chief priest and the teachers of the law. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. So, just want to make a point there. He did it secretly. So he wants to know the time, and somewhat naively, they let King Herod know the exact time that they saw the miraculous star announcing the Messiah's birth. They let him know when it first appeared in the sky. So now he's doing math, because they told him when it first appeared in the sky. So he's counting the days. So now he's got a knowledge of both the place, which is Bethlehem. He's got a knowledge of the time frame, so he knows it's the baby is still a baby, or a growing baby. Verse 8, he sends the well-meaning wise men on a fact-finding mission. Okay, sends them on a fact-finding mission in service to his wickedness. Verse 8, he tells them he sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me so that I too may go and worship him." So he wants them to go and find the child and report back to him. And you know what? All the time with the Magi or the wise men there, he's hiding his malicious intent. He says he wants to go and worship him. He didn't want to worship him. Okay. He feigns piety. Go and search carefully for the child, so that I too may go and worship him. I almost thought I had to the end of that. The reality would be, ha 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 ha, because he was evil. He didn't want to worship him. You know what? Magi didn't need to spend a lot of time, they didn't need to spend a lot of time searching for Jesus. Because the miraculous guiding light in the form of a roaming star, verse 9 tells us, went ahead of them. That's what verse 9 tells us. After they'd heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. So it seems the star came into view, went ahead of them, and hovered over the location of where Jesus was. Now, at this point, it's estimated Jesus is probably a little over a year old. He's not a baby anymore. He's not a baby wrapped in cloths. And he's not in the manger anymore. Not a baby wrapped in cloths. He's not in the manger. And at this point, Herod's going to deduce that the child is probably under 2 years old. And I know that from verse 16, if you peek ahead in the text, because, okay, he's going to deduce that the child's under 2 years old and in accordance with the time that he had learned from the Magi. They told him when the star appeared in the sky. Now, he's not in the manger anymore, though. By this time, Mary and Joseph have found a new home, okay? Mary, Joseph, and Jesus have settled into a more permanent dwelling in Bethlehem. Possibly a home belonging to a relative of theirs, okay? Because they were, that's why they had to go back originally for the census, because they're part of the line of David, and they're from part of the line of David, which is home base basically is Bethlehem. So they're probably found a home of a relative, or at least a descendant of the long line of David. A relative that could be an aunt, that could be an uncle, that could be a cousin. But they found lodging by this point somewhere in Bethlehem. I mean, again, that had been the family's ancient hometown. Now, I don't think that Mary and Joseph expected a knock on the door. But that's what happened. Okay, the visitors came, and they were wealthy foreigners. Okay, and decked out in fine clothing. They were, remember, carrying gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Okay, so I don't think they expected the knock on the door, and they didn't expect greetings. They didn't expect gifts. But something else happened too. In verse 11, these guys get there. You know what they did? Verse 11 tells us that they bowed down and they worshipped him. They come in and the child on their knees worshiping him. Proskuneo. That little Greek word carries a lot of significance. It's more than just showing honor and respect to a human ruler. This Greek word, well, the Persians practiced this word, and they did it in the presence of their deified king. Now, this is not, I'm not talking about the baby Jesus, but the Persians had their own deified king, and that's what they did. This Greek word, they worshipped him. But they saw him but when they worshipped their deified king, they saw him as deity. So these three wise men, these magi, and got down and worshipped and recognized that this baby was the Messiah and that he was deity. By this act, the object of worship, the baby, they understood was beyond the human realm. Beyond the human realm. So, with their worship, they also, of course, brought the offerings. They brought An offering not only fit for a king, but also appropriate for the worship of God. They brought gold. By the way, it's interesting, they brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Those were items that were common to trade in those days. These guys made the long journey. Well, they made the long journey. They had gold, frankincense, and myrrh. That's probably how they lived and bought things along the way. But here they go, and they offer gold, which would have been the standard offering for a king. It would have been a tribute or a sign of honor. And so the first gift they offer gold. They recognize this baby is a king. He's the king. At that time, that was the most precious metal you could offer, and they offer it up. But beyond gold, they gave him eastern spices of frankincense and myrrh. One other scholar offers this description of these spices. He said, frankincense, a resin of bitter taste, but fragrant odor, was used chiefly in, listen to this, sacrifices and in the services of the temple. Sacrifices and in the services of the temple. That was frankincense. Myrrh, an aromatic of a similar kind, was employed for fumigation and for improving the taste of wine, but especially as an ingredient of a very precious ointment. Many commentators have suggested that frankincense pointed to Jesus' deity or to his function as a priest. Don't forget, they would use that in worship, so it would point to his function as a priest. And the myrrh there was associated, myrrh that goes into an oily substance was associated with burial. John 19, 38 to 42, you'll see they'll talk about myrrh. Okay, so they said that offering of that gift would be a foreshadowing of Christ's suffering and in his death. But I really want you to see in all of this, these are valuable gifts. And they're all offered up to Jesus, who is priest, king, and deity all in once. So, in the response of the wise men from the east stands in stark contrast to the reaction of the wicked king in Jerusalem. They both heard the news, but they both reacted in different ways. You had the Magi or the wise men, and then you had the wicked king in Jerusalem. You know what Herod wanted to do? Herod heard about the Messiah and he wanted to kill him. Okay. Herod wants to kill the baby Messiah. The Magi, in the meantime, they want to worship the baby Messiah. By the time the Magi are ready to leave Jerusalem, okay, the Lord in verse 12 warns them in a dream. He warns them in a dream of the true intentions of Herod. In fact, verse 12, and it says, and having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they return to their country by another route. So they go there, they go prostrate, they worship the baby king, priest, Messiah, okay, who is deity, offer their gifts, and then the Lord speaks to them in a dream and says, don't go back to Herod. And he tells them Herod's true intentions, that he wants to do away with the baby king. So they don't go report to the king. The Magi just slip off kind of unnoticed. I think they said, let's get out of Dodge, so to speak, and let's get out quick. And they return to their own country, wherever that was from. Whether that was somewhere out in Persia or Babylon or whatever territory they came from. You know, over the years, we're led to believe that 3 kings visited baby Jesus in the manger. But I want you to see in these verses here in Matthew, you and I can put that fairy tale to rest. There's only 2 kings that appear in these 12 verses. One of them is wicked. And he has zero claim to the throne. And that would be Herod the Great. And the other was the true Messiah, the Son of David, the Son of God, Jesus. Herod, he was a monster. This guy in the text here, he manipulated, he lied, he schemed. And as the text goes on, and we'll go on next week, we're going to find out that he's going to send some troops out on a search and destroy mission to eliminate the baby king, to eliminate any threat to his power. He was wicked. I want you to see the real center of attention in this passage, though. Whether it's people who are indifferent in the passage, people who are hostile in the passage, or people who worship in the passage, the center of the passage is the Messiah, the baby, the young Messiah. There's different responses in the passage. You know what? Here's the thing about these responses in the passage. It's not a whole lot different than how people respond today. There's three significant responses in this passage that are not a whole lot different than how you and I interact with people in terms of how people respond to news of the Messiah every day, the Christ. Well, the first thing we see in the passage here is, I just want you to know sometimes people are going to just be indifferent about hearing about the Messiah, hearing about Jesus the Christ. When Herod called together the high priest and the teachers of the law, the scribes there, these are the religious leaders, the Bible scholars. They knew without hesitation the facts surrounding the coming of the Messiah. Herod wanted to know where? They knew. They told him. They said, Micah 5:2 prophesies it's going to happen in Bethlehem. I mean, if this was Bible trivia, they won. I mean, they might have even patted themselves in the back. Oh, we can answer. That's easy, King. We can tell you the answer to that. But here's the thing. Assuming they found out the reason why Herod was asking. Again, assuming they found out the reason why Herod was asking. You know, the idea that there had been the star and the wise men came from the east and said, where's the one born king of the Jews? I just want you to know, in the text here, just at least by what it appears, the religious leaders, they didn't think it worth checking out themselves. There's nothing in the text about that. They went off, well, let's go to Bethlehem and see. Could it have happened? You don't see that in the text. Whatever the writer says, they had knowledge, they understood the scriptures, they had the book knowledge. But they have anything inside of them and said, let's go check it out. They understood the truth of the scriptures. But the truth of the scriptures didn't go from their head to their heart. And if it didn't go from their head to their heart, and it certainly didn't go to their feet. They never went to Bethlehem to check it out according to the scriptures here. They never attempted to visit. Now, if they went, and it's just not recorded in the text, I'll apologize to them in heaven someday. But when I look at the text, they were kind of indifferent. I think if they went, it would have been recorded in the text. Then we see in the text here, you know what else we saw in the text? We saw hostility. Yeah, hostility. That's another way people respond to the Messiah. Herod veiled his true motives in false piety. He said, "Oh, you guys, Magi, go find the baby king so I can come worship him too." So he veils his true intentions in piety and curiosity. But the reality is he just wanted to destroy the child. He wanted to destroy the child because the child was a threat to, guess what? His rule. He was the king. He was the one who sat on the throne. You know, people are a whole lot different today. When they find out about the claims of, listen to this, not just that he's a baby and he became a man, how about his lordship? When they start hearing about that he's Lord, you know, he is Lord, he is Lord, he is risen from the dead. People start hearing that stuff, and he is Lord. People feel threatened. They feel threatened by his lordship. I mean, nobody's threatened by a tiny baby, right? Nobody's threatened by a moral teacher. Oh, that pastor, he's a good moral teacher. Nobody's threatened by some religious philosopher, are they? Not today, they're not. Because all of those descriptions, those are just men. And you might respect them. You might ignore them. But when you start talking about Jesus, the Christ, who is Lord, God who became a man, the King with all authority under heaven and earth, who deserves our full obedience, and listen to this, our submission, well, when people hear that, I'm going to call them unbelievers. Because if you're not already a believer in Christ and you're not already a follower, you haven't already submitted, you're an unbeliever. They don't want the realm of their personal power to be threatened. Because if you're not following Jesus, guess who's in control of your life? You are. And you're going to fight such a Messiah. Herod did. He was going to kill him. Well, on this level, the people you and I interact with, they're going to fight obedience against obedience and submission to him. Because they don't want to give up the lordship over their own lives. No different than Herod the Great. Because you know what? You know who we want to be in charge of our lives? We want to be in charge of our lives. What we want, when we want, where we want, how we want. But we're good people, though. No. Okay. No. We may not be out to kill the Messiah, but we reject him, just like the evil King Herod did. So you had the indifferent magi there. Not the magi, excuse me. The indifferent chief priests, the teachers of the law, the scribes. And then you got Herod, who wants to kill the Messiah, or certainly rejects the Messiah. And the other people you see in the text here are the Magi, and they want to worship the Messiah. That's the third way people respond today. Some will reject, some are indifferent, some will reject and be hostile, but some will worship. Okay? There's a lot of wise men and women today who have chosen to follow the guiding light of the Scriptures and have fallen down and worshipped and adored Jesus Christ as for who he is. The King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He is God who came in the flesh. So we haven't necessarily had a star in the sky to follow, but we've got the guiding light of God's Word. And some people have actually received it and choose to worship and follow Jesus and allow him to be the King or the Lord of their lives. So just like the Magi of old, they acknowledge him. They acknowledge him as a person worthy of worship, a person worthy of honor, a person worthy of trust, a person worthy of our obedience, and basically who deserves our total allegiance. And we don't betray our true King. We don't betray our true King, listen to this, for short-term gains. See, you got the people that are indifferent, then you got the people like Herod who are hostile, who want to keep the throne for themselves because they got a whole lot of short-term gains. But even if it's of us who worship him, no, we understand that he is Lord of every area of our life, all the time. And we don't compromise with any short-term gains, let alone total short-term gains. Okay? Because a lot of people choose to they want to rule their own throne, and they have other things they want to make the Lord of their life. That's what I mean by short-term gains, because their car is important or whatever material thing or fame or whatever it is. So, we look at the text today. We had the indifferent people, we had the hostile people, we had the people who wanted to worship. I can't help but think as I'm sharing this message with you now, this text, you've heard about the three wise men who come from the east, and we three kings of Orient are, and you know what's upon us? The New Year's upon us. Yeah, New Year's is this week. The New Year is upon us. And each of us today must choose how we're going to respond to the Messiah. Yeah. Every one of us has to choose how we're going to respond to the Messiah. Some of us may have already made that choice. Some of us, but we need to choose how we're going to respond to the Messiah, like the wise magi in the text. Are we going to be like the wise magi in the text and worship him and submit to him in this new year? And maybe we're already doing that. Or are we going to be like wicked King Herod? And we want to rule our own throne. We've got our own short-term gains that we want here in this life because we want this, and we want this, and we want this, and we want that. So New Year's is upon us, my friends. If you haven't already made the choice, what you going to choose? How we respond? Will you be like the magi, the wise men, and choose to worship the Messiah and give him all of your heart, all of your mind, give him all of your soul? Or are you going to be like wicked King Herod? If you've already chosen the Messiah, praise God, march on into the New Year's. If you haven't chosen the Messiah already and you're listening to this message today, I choose you to search the scriptures and choose to follow Jesus. He's the only way. Because any other way is the wicked way. God bless you. Merry Christmas. Have a wonderful New Year's, and I'll see you all next week.